Hi, I'm Candice Malcolm, and welcome to the Candice Malcolm Show. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Hopefully, you're feeling okay. I'm a little under the weather, just to warn you. And the thing that happens in my house is that my kids wake up incredibly early, like ungodly hour. My husband and I used to sort of take turns getting up with them. Someone's always up at 5 o'clock. Like we have 4 kids under the age of 6. One of them is always getting us up at 5 o'clock, and I think basically we've just resigned to the fact that we will be getting up early. And so it's forced us to go to bed super early. So now sometimes I wake up at 5 o'clock and I'm the first one awake, but I always wake up at 5. And I feel like when you're feeling a little under the weather, you really need a good night's sleep. And when you have 4 little kids, you just never, ever get a good night's sleep. We've got a lot of news to get to on the show today. I'm really excited by the headlines and what I'm seeing in the news. We talked about it a lot on the show yesterday with Donald Trump laying out his agenda, his incredibly popular agenda, by the way, and just saying enough is enough. If you came to our country illegally, you have to go. If you came to the country illegally and you are a criminal, you are getting deported now. I think that is just so much common sense, something that I personally, in my career as a journalist and a pundit, have been talking about for years and years and years, like decades at this point. So it's great to see a world leader on the stage actually following through with it. And I think it's having an effect here in Canada because our own Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, made similar comments. We're going to get to all of that in the show. We're going to talk about the latest with Danielle Smith, the trade war. We're going to talk about the Liberal leadership race. And for the entire show, I'm very pleased to be joined by journalist Rachel Parker. Rachel is the host of the Rachel Parker Show here at True North. She was formerly our Alberta correspondent. She's covered Alberta politics extensively prior to joining True North. She worked for iPolitics. She did a very prestigious internship with the Globe and Mail. She's written for the Toronto Star. So she was mainstream media, now journalist, and now she's come over to the good side, the independent side. So Rachel, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
We matched today.
I think we matched last time you were on the show too. I think somehow, we're sending each other signals there. So I want to talk about the news today. I want to talk about Pierre Poilievre coming out stronger than I've ever heard him before. So I'm going to play this clip. This is Pierre Poilievre. He was speaking at the Holocaust commemoration ceremony yesterday, Monday, January 27th in Ottawa. And he made a very clear statement about what's going to happen when he becomes prime minister. Let's play that clip.
We see on our own streets anti-Semitism, guided by obscene, woke ideologies that have led to an explosion in hate crimes. Hate crimes were up over 100% in Canada before October 7th. Now they're up 251%, with Jews being the principal victims of those crimes. We must not just condemn these things, we must take action against them. We must deport from our country any temporary resident that is here on a permit or a visa that is carrying out violence or hate crimes on our soil.
So strong words there from Pierre Poilievre. And just so that we're clear about what he's saying, like there's strong sentiment, I think, in Canada, and this is what's happening in the United States, to deport people who are in the country illegally and who are also violent criminals. So 2 different categories. People who are in the country illegally, it's still split on whether or not, we want them all deported or whether the ones that are adhering to all other laws should go. But if you're a criminal and you're here illegally, you have to go. That's what Trump is doing. In Canada, what he's saying is even people who are here on legal visas, Rachel, people who came to the country legally as a student or a temporary worker, who are not yet citizens, if you engage in violence or commit a hate crime, I mean, just look at the vitriol that we see from these protests and rallies in support of a terrorist group, Hamas. We've seen it all over the country, particularly bad in Toronto and Montreal. But these images of people coming out basically in support of a ruthless, vicious terrorist group, a death cult, celebrating a massacre against women and children in their homes in Israel. These are the kind of people that Pierre Poilievre is talking about. I haven't heard him say anything quite this strong when it comes to his positions on immigration. What do you take away from all of this?
My sense of Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives is that they are really watching the moods and the attitudes of Canadians. We've seen this with Pierre Poilievre time and time again. He can be slow to speak, which can be a very good thing. And he frequently refers back to saying, I'm not the prime minister. I'm the leader of the official opposition. It's not my responsibility to be responding to these incidents. For example, that was his line when it came to the tariffs. Some of the premiers were pushing retaliatory tariffs. Obviously, we know that Ottawa and Justin Trudeau and Melanie Joly were pushing that. Melanie Joly even threatening to turn off the taps here in Alberta. And Pierre Poilievre was pretty slow to come out with a response saying, it's not my job to respond to these things. And I think he uses the fact that he is the opposition leader to the absolute best of his ability. And, he's really careful not to make sort of unforced errors. So if he doesn't have to respond to something, he's not going to unless he's absolutely sure he's captured the mood of the Canadians and knows what to say. Now, you can criticize this. You can say that he should be more of a leader, that he should be more forthright with his views on things and coming out with his positions. But it is good politics. That much is obvious. So in this instant, we've seen Pierre Poilievre sort of sit on the sidelines with the immigration issue. He hasn't been too vocal. And over the last year, we've seen him sort of ramp up his rhetoric. And that is because Canadians are fed up with the illegal immigration and we are fed up with the hate crimes. We are consistently seeing scenes out of Toronto and the GTA that look like something out of a third world country. There are neighborhoods in this country that I would not go with my children. That is a crazy thing to say as a Canadian, and I would never say that 10 years ago. But balkanization is happening in certain parts of the GTA, and it's simply not safe for a young mother to be with her children. And Canadians are fed up with that, and Pierre Poilievre recognizes that. So we're seeing him ramp up his rhetoric here because he feels confident that it is the attitude of the nation that he is capturing when he talks about deportations.
It's such a good point that he is slow to talk, because another example, and we talked about this on the show last week, was him sort of being slow to the take when it came to the issue of trans. And so Danielle Smith came out and announced the policy that youth were not going to be able to have access to sex change operations and cross-sex hormones and all this kind of stuff that causes irreparable damage and harm to children. Not going to happen in Alberta. Pierre was quite late to that. It took a couple of days or maybe even a week or two of prodding from the media for him to finally take a position. When he did, he took the right one. So I give him credit for that. A lot of conservative leaders in this country in the past have been accused of just kind of following the polls and looking where the polls are and waiting to draft their message until they see the polls. I don't get that sense from Pierre. I get the sense that he really, you said that he does a good job of capturing the mood of Canadians. I get that sense too, that it's not that he's sitting in the back listening to advisors telling him what to do on each issue. That he's actually listening to people. He's out there hearing things, seeing things. And to your point, when he takes a position, he is going to make sure that it is the right one. What do you think about him talking? Because he wasn't talking about deporting illegals or even people with criminal records per se. He was talking about violent hateful offenders, specifically in the context of anti-Semitism and hate crimes. What do you think about that specific point?
I think that it's a common sense approach, and he's someone who's consistently touted himself as a common sense principled leader. The people who are in here on permits and visas are in this country on the permission of the Canadian government, who receives its power from the Canadian people. If you are not yet a Canadian citizen, you do not have a right to be in this country. And if you are going to be committing crimes, or if you are going to be committing hate crimes, then we have every right to rescind your ability to be in this country, and we absolutely should do so. It's time to put Canadians first again. And the fact that Pierre Poilievre has taken this extra step by saying people who are in this country on the permission of the Canadian government, whether that through a visa or a permit, if they are going to be committing illegal acts, then they are going to have to leave. As I said, he's picking up on the mood of the nation, and he's even taking it a step further, potentially because, he hasn't been super vocal on this issue. And we've seen the tides turn so much. I think another example of this is the fact that an individual, Ruby Dalla, I'm sure we'll talk more about her later.
Yeah, we got that. We got that. We're going to talk about it later in the show.
Who's running for the Liberal Party leadership. I mean, she's even coming out and talking about deportations. So this is quickly becoming a very popular talking point in Canada. I'm very glad to see it. And we're seeing Pierre Poilievre take it even a next step further. And to me, it gives me a lot of hope when I see this sort of rhetoric enter Canadian politics, because it's becoming normalized to talk about deportations in Canada, where it wasn't for so long. And I think that it's a necessary thing for this country, as it is a necessary thing for the United States of America.
Absolutely. I think it's a step in the right direction, Rachel, but I don't think that Pierre goes nearly far enough. I think that he really needs to up his game. I had Maxime Bernier, the People's Party leader, on last week, and he made it very clear that he would deport. I think that one of the issues, you said that Pierre hasn't been very vocal. This issue hit the news last week that the number of Gazan refugees from Gaza that are coming to Canada. We learned from a Black Hawk's report on January 17th that the feds approved a $3,000 tax-free grant to each individual Gazan refugee, plus an additional $1,500 per child, plus free healthcare. That is according to our friends over in Blacklock. Mark Miller, immigration minister, previously announced a 5-fold increase in the number of Gazan refugees being let into Canada, upping the limit to 5,000. A very good point from Michael Campbell of Money Talks, which is just that Canada has accepted more refugees from Gaza than most Middle East countries combined. So, why are we taking these people in? Just to provide a bit more context, people in Gaza, the Gaza Strip is an incredibly radical place. Like the governing party of that area is Hamas, the terrorist group. Hamas receives overwhelming support from the people. Recent polls show that more than half of Gazans support the Hamas party. An overwhelming majority of those people supported the massacre of children and women and families in their homes on October 7th. So these are incredibly radical people that we are literally paying to come to Canada, and we are giving them free welfare when they get here. And like the countries around them, like Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, any of those countries don't want them. Saudi Arabia, the Muslim majority countries in the region don't want them because the people are so radical. They have been brainwashed to believe just horrendous things about the West and about Jews. Like, they need serious denazification before they come to Canada. And here we are welcoming these people with open arms. Why wouldn't Pierre stand up against that and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be letting in people who have incredibly radical views in the midst of a war? This was the topic, Rachel, of my 2016 book, Losing True North, Justin Trudeau's assault on Canadian citizenship. Basically, right after Trudeau was elected, I laid out the problems with his ideology, with his immigration policy, specifically his policies about letting in 50,000 Syrians on a rush basis without proper national security checks, without ideological screening. And the problem with bringing in people like that at the time, I think it was like 1 in 3 Syrians supported ISIS, like literally support ISIS. And we're like, hey, come on in, come to Canada. The problem is deep. And it's been happening for decades now, where you have really, really radical people in Canada. I mean, the number of ISIS fighters who return to Canada is still quite large. The number of radicals, we don't even track it. But again, this kind of all just goes to show that there's a lot of problems when it comes to our immigration system and the radicalization of the people that we're selecting. And yeah, it's great that Pierre is starting to pay attention to it, but I think that he has to go much, much further. What do you think?
To answer your question, why didn't he go further? As I've said before, I think that he is someone who is very calculated and is never going to say more than he has to get his point across. I think he's going to be careful not to alienate any potential voters ahead of the upcoming election. And so I think he's going to say just enough that he needs to so that Canadians can feel like he's on our side without maybe making those ideological points about who these people are and where they're coming from, because he wouldn't want to alienate any potential voters. And I think there's a really simple argument to make here. I mean, you've raised your concerns about the people that are coming here and what their views might be and those views that they might be bringing to Canada. But there's another really simple argument to make here that's just simply Canada's full. We don't have room for any more immigrants. We actually physically do not have the housing for them. We do not have the school care for them. We do not have the health care for them. Every Canadian knows that it is an absolute nightmare when you have to go to the hospital right now or visit your family doctor, or God forbid, if you need to see a specialist, you are going to be on that wait list for absolute months. So for Canadians who are suffering under the weight of failed socialism, and they're hearing that their government is going to be importing more people here and offering them welfare that already isn't working for the Canadian people who have paid into it for their entire lives, it's absolutely blood boiling. And I can tell you right now that there isn't a single Canadian family who would turn down the extra help of one-time payments to them, especially $1,500 per kid. Most people are really struggling under the inflationary crisis that the Liberal government is responsible for. And instead, this government is totally tone deaf on the needs of Canadians and is going to be paying out newcomers that Canadians just don't want right now.
That's so true. Well, speaking of healthcare, I talked about healthcare a little bit on the show yesterday, and I made the point my own personal experience being in a hospital in Canada versus being one in the United States. Bar none, the United States one was just like so much nicer and better. I take the point that I had good health insurance thanks to my husband's job, and particularly, I just noticed in the comments some people were like taking issue with that and saying, "Well, if you're not insured or if you're if you are self employed or a business owner, you don't get the good insurance in the United States." That's a good point. But of course, this is all in the context, Rachel, that Trump said that if Canada were to join America, we would have better health uh, coverage, which is an interesting one. I want to talk about Trump a little bit because his agenda is incredibly popular. According to a recent Ipsos poll, 55% of Americans support deporting all immigrants who are in the US illegally. Support rises for deporting immigrants who are in the country illegally, but who arrived during the recent wave. They want that 63% want those ones gone. And then the deporting immigrants who are here, who have entered illegally and who have criminal records, 87% of Americans unite behind Trump in saying, let's get these immigrants who came illegally and who have criminal records out of the country. That includes 94% of Republicans and 83% of Democrats. Wow. That is a popular issue. Apparently, actress and singer Selena Gomez, though, didn't get the message because she put out this video, just really misreading the cultural tide. So let's. Do we have this clip? Let's play this clip of Selena Gomez crying uncontrollably about the deportation of illegal criminals.
I just want to say that I'm so sorry. All my people are getting attacked. The children. I don't understand. I'm so sorry. I wish I could do something, but I can't. I don't know what to do. I'll try everything, I promise.
So I think she missed the memo here, Rachel. That was like so 2016 that we cared about what Hollywood actors and singers had to say, and that they were allowed to just like, put on a performative sob there and get support from people. So I like Charlie Kirk's reaction, conservative American commentator. She goes, "My people." He goes, "What? My people? Aren't you American? Were you sobbing at the over 100,000 Americans dead from fentanyl poisoning? Were there tears over the 340,000 children who went missing after being trafficked at the border? Why aren't the Americans your people?" Of course, Selena Gomez is just a hugely influential person. She has 422 million followers on Instagram. She's reportedly a billionaire from her makeup empire as well as her acting and singing career, which started at a young age. She was on Disney. She quickly deleted that video, though, Rachel, because of backlash. So the tides have turned. Americans support Trump. They support this agenda. And, you don't get to cry and pretend that you're sad over deporting criminal illegals. What's your take on all this?
Just to put this into context, like Selena Gomez was the up and coming when I was really young. Like I watched her first ever music video and was obsessed with it. I was probably like 12 or something at the time. So I was always a really big Selena Gomez fan. As I've gotten older and all these Hollywood celebrities have gone woke, it's like can be at times, depending on the celebrity, sometimes I'm able to sort of like compartmentalize their politics versus liking their stuff. But the truth of the matter is she actually hasn't really put out anything very good. So it's pretty easy just to throw her in the camp of people that I don't take seriously or care for the artwork that she puts out. The questions that come to my mind when she put this video is one thing. So she's crying. What about people like Lake and Riley who were raped and murdered by illegal immigrants? Again, to Charlie Kirk's point, she also had no tears for Lake and Riley or for the many other women of America who were raped and killed by illegal immigrants. And the other thing that really caught my attention there when she's going, my people. Yeah, she's talking about my people. She's referring to illegals. She's not referring to Americans. So, I saw this funny post yesterday. It's like, oh, so she's obviously an illegal. Maybe we should just deport her to be safe. But, the thing that caught my attention was the people who have been deported by ICE so far, they're not, the young innocent families who are here illegal. It's the hardened criminals. Those are the people that are being prioritized right now. So for any American to have tears for the fact that illegal hardened criminals who have raped Americans, who have stolen from Americans, and to have tears for that just shows how disingenuous this is. Because as I've said, this isn't she's talking about the children. These aren't the people who are being prioritized right now. It's the people who have criminal records that have been on ICE's, ICE has been paying attention to them for a number of weeks, if not years now. They haven't had the powers to do anything about it. Those are the people that are being deported, and everyone in America should be celebrating that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it just shows, like, I kind of wonder, like, where does Selena Gomez get her news from? Like, is she just so out of touch that she really believes all the sort of hoaxes and memes that, like, ICE is, like, breaking down doors of schools and pulling kids away? Because it's not happening. To your point, it's literally the gang members. It's the ones who have taken over apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, or, the people who have been convicted of crimes who are part of these gangs. Like, it just seems to me like, really, I kind of like wonder, like, I'm worried about her. Like, is she okay over there? Like, why is she crying? Why is she breaking down? Who's feeding her the news? She needs to be like, I don't know. It seems like she's been brainwashed or something. And the fact that she quickly deleted that post means that obviously she caught on, and maybe someone's actually filling her in now. Maybe she's being fed some solid truth through the independent media. I hope so. But to your point, you mentioned this earlier, Rachel, that even the libs in Canada are coming around to the idea that we need to start deporting people who shouldn't be here. And so we're talking, of course, about Ruby Dalla, who is a former MP from Brampton, which is a very dense immigration population area in the GTA. She's running for leader. We played this on the show yesterday, but we'll play it again. She reiterated her plan that she wants to deport all illegal immigrants living in Canada. Let's play that post.
There are over 500,000 illegal immigrants in Canada. This is unacceptable. As the daughter of immigrant parents, I know firsthand that immigrants have helped build our great country. But we must clamp down on human trafficking and those that are here illegally. As your Prime Minister, I promise you, I will deport every illegal immigrant in Canada.
Wow. So, sorry, my mistake. We didn't play that clip yesterday. It's a new clip. She posted this video herself on her X page, but she's using pretty firm language. Again, language that I would like to hear from all parties. I'm happy that some liberals are taking this problem seriously. What are your thoughts, Rachel?
I sense that, the liberal establishment isn't taking Ruby seriously as a contender. And so she's sort of offering these outside views that you wouldn't really hear the party brass repeat. But it is refreshing. And as I've said, I think the important thing here is that we're seeing a big narrative shift in Canada, that it is becoming popular and normal to talk about deportations for illegals. And as we said before, with Pierre Poilievre even taking that a step further. So I think that this is refreshing to see. I'm also really enjoying watching the sort of disaster that the federal leadership race is unfolding before us, because there's absolutely no way for them to enforce who's registering to be a member of the Liberal Party, which would be one thing if it was just voting for the leader of a new party, but you're also voting for the next Prime Minister of Canada at the same time. So it certainly is adding a lot of ethical questions, but now we're seeing, a lot of organizers across the country essentially attempt to co-opt this leadership race. We saw that, everyone was throwing their support behind Ariane Chandra, who is now removed from the leadership race because he said he didn't speak French, and he said he didn't think that. And I sort of saw that coming, I'll be honest. I sort of saw that coming when he said, oh, I don't speak French. And, the Quebecers, they don't care. Like, that was obviously not true. And I was like, I suspect that he might be removed from the race because of that. But you have to kind of wonder the timing of it all. I mean, he made those comments quite a while before. And then all of a sudden we see all these people signing up for the Liberal leadership race, attempting to co-opt the movement to vote him in. And then the party comes out and announces that he's actually going to be removed from the race. So I'm kind of sitting back watching this and saying, how many people did sign up for the Liberal leadership race to vote for him? Was it actually making the leadership uncomfortable? And now we're seeing those same people who now saying they're going to vote for Ruby. And, it actually seems like she has some great common sense policy. So I'm curious to see how this all shapes up and to see what kind of support she ends up landing in the Liberal leadership race.
Yeah, I mean, certainly she's not part of the establishment. You have Mark Carney out there pretending that he's not part of the establishment when we all know he's very much an insider. Ruby Dalla kind of disappeared for a while and hasn't been in there. She's probably a lot more in touch with what people think and believe. And the fact that even in her community of Brampton, she's hearing and she's supporting this idea that you got to deport people. And she says 500,000 in that video. The number is so much larger of people who have come to this country, made asylum claims, most of them very bogus. They don't show up for their court hearings or their case gets rejected and they don't show up for their deportation order. Trudeau also said that he was going to cancel the visas and presumably deport, or he asked them to leave all of the student visas and all of those students that they brought in that have just created an unbelievable cost of living crisis. So look, I agree that it's amusing to watch the Liberal Party implode and watch a total disaster show that Justin Trudeau has left in the wake. I have a hard time finding it amusing in the context of the fact that Canada doesn't have any leadership. We're facing a looming trade war. We have a president of the United States who's incredibly strong, making threats at Canada. We need a leader. We need an election. And, it would be fun to watch the party implode and the leadership race happen in this way if it weren't so dire for the country. I want to show you this. This is just kind of funny. Ruby Dalla put up a graphic on her X page saying this is what real change looks like. The graphic, I'll read it for the listening audience. It says, Ruby Dalla will let me start again. Ruby Dalla will deport every illegal immigrant living in Canada as prime minister. Now, if you just read that and didn't quite understand that she's running for prime minister, it kind of sounds like she's saying that she would deport every illegal immigrant living in Canada who is also prime minister. You had Tristan Hopper over at the National Post pointing this out, not to be pedantic. This is technically saying everyone who is in the country illegally and also prime minister would be deported. A couple of other people making this joke. Pretty funny. I don't know. Probably
It's such
not
a
the college
journalist thing
campaign.
to it's such a journalist thing to make that type of joke. Like they just can't help themselves.
You're right, because I was like, I don't think that's very funny. I'm not going to include it in the show. And then my producers were like, no, it's funny. Sorry, not to throw you guys under the bus there, but my husband also thought it was really funny. He tweeted about it. So, but yeah, I think a bit of inside baseball there. Actually speaking of foreigners, because you're talking about that, the foreign interference inquiry is set to release its final report today. So a lot of us are very interested in this. The final report from the Public Inquiry into Foreign Interference in Canadian Elections, led by Commissioner Hogue, set to be released today. So it's coming out. It's probably out now. I haven't had a chance to look into it and dissect it, but we will for sure on tomorrow's show. The inquiry conducted in 2 phases examined the foreign interference in the 2019 and 2021 elections. The initial reports found no significant outcome, but this report coming out today, or that's out today, is expected to provide recommendations to improve protection from foreign meddling. We know what's happening. I don't think they're going to name names. We know that there's 11 MPs who are supposedly the beneficiary of foreign funding. Like, we're talking about adversarial states like China funding MPs, individual MPs in our country. They won't tell us who. I hope this is one of those issues that if Pierre gets elected, he will expose who those 11 MPs are, because Canadians deserve to know which of our representatives are actually representing a foreign adversarial state. The Liberal leadership race is just absolutely ripe for abuse because of those ridiculous rules. You don't have to pay anything. You don't even have to be a citizen. I don't even think you have to live in Canada. It's just completely ridiculous. Doesn't seem like our country. It doesn't seem like a country that takes itself very seriously. You hear a lot of Canadians on the left, Rachel, really taking offense to Trump, saying Canada's not for sale. How dare you try to undermine our sovereignty and integrity? It's like, that's already happening, guys. The country's already, really fallen apart over here. I don't know if you're noticing, but you literally have foreign adversaries funding MPs in this country. So what's your take on this whole report?
Well, I think the question is whether the Liberal Party will take it seriously and if they will implement some of the recommendations in their ongoing leadership race. It's not too late for them to do so, and that could show, a real effort that they care about Canada's national sovereignty and they're taking these claims seriously. But we haven't seen that from them up to par. And you're certainly correct that the Liberal leadership race is just ripe for foreign interference because there's absolutely no safeguards surrounding it. I had Brian Lilly on my show a couple weeks ago, and he was warning about the same same thing. As soon as the leadership race was announced, it was evident to a lot of people that there was no safeguards around the election, and that if China wanted to get involved in it, there's not really going to be anything stopping them. So the Liberal Party has an opportunity here to do the right thing and to implement some of these recommendations in their leadership race to ensure that it's actually Canadians who are voting for their next prime minister. I mean, even a simple rule change would probably help in that regard. And, there should be some credentials that you might have to show, although I know the Liberal Party doesn't really like the idea of ensuring that Canadian citizens are the ones voting in their elections or certainly in their leadership races. But they have an opportunity to prove that this is an issue they care about. We know that Justin Trudeau has been hammering Pierre Poilievre for not obtaining the security clearance that he would need to, receive that report on who those 11 MPs were. And, he's been trying to say that Pierre Poilievre simply couldn't obtain that security clearance. That's seen sort of the rumors we've been seeing spreaded by Trudeau. And hopefully we will see a Pierre Poilievre government. Hopefully we will see those MPs' names come forward. I think it's a disservice to Canadians that information of such national security and importance to Canadians is being withheld from us. But it's seeming like time and time again, we really have more of a ruling class in Canada. It doesn't seem like our politicians exist to serve us, but it's seeming more and more like Canadians exist to serve their ruling class.
I mean, I just don't understand how you can continue to be a member of parliament if we've found that you take money from foreign adversarial state. Like, it just doesn't even compute. Like, why are they still here? Why are they still getting money? Why are they still representing us? Like, name them and fire them. And I don't even care what political party they're affiliated with. Like, those people should not get to serve in public office in Canada. I really, really hope that this report allows Canada to make some progress here, because right now it is a bit of a joke how weak and insecure our system is. Okay, Rachel, let's talk about the latest when it comes to the Libs and Trump's tariffs. So I want to talk about this report that was in the Globe and Mail this morning. This is just so typical Ottawa, so typical like the way that Liberals react to threats. Anytime there's an issue, it has to be a national strategy. So the Globe and Mail basically just reporting that Ottawa is planning pandemic level relief for workers and businesses if Trump imposes tariffs. So anytime there's a problem, the federal government will sweep in with a national plan, pandemic level relief. Let's just pause for a second here. Canada's broke. Canada's bankrupt. Canada spent way too much money because Justin Trudeau shut down the economy during the pandemic, and then he paid everybody to not work for a couple of years. And because of that, our country is bankrupt, basically. And now he's saying, hey, we can just do it all again. We'll just tap that magic money tree, borrow more money, leverage the future for future Canadians, young Canadians, borrow more, and we will pay everybody again if Trump imposes these tariffs. So according to the Globe and Mail's report here, it says that the federal government is planning a multi-billion-dollar pandemic-style bailout for workers and businesses if U.S. President Donald Trump follows through on his threat to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian goods as early as Feb 1, two sources say. The sources said that some of the measures, such as waiving a 1-week waiting period for employment insurance benefits, do not require parliamentary approval. Of course not. They're always going to find ways, Rachel, to do things without actually getting the consent of the governed here. It says the bulk of potential spending on new programs to help laid off workers and businesses affected by tariffs will require legislative approval, which will not take place until Parliament resumes all the way into March. This just drives me absolutely crazy. The Liberals will always take the wrong approach, right? Like, Trump makes it pretty simple. He says, hey guys, your border is broken. Hey guys, you're sending all these horrible drugs into our country. Fix those problems. And what does Trudeau say? Hey, I've got a better solution. Why don't we just print all the money in the world and pay everybody instead? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, to your point, we can't afford this. We're still paying for the pandemic relief that was offered a few years ago. I mean, our children's children is going to be paying for it. Canadians have never felt their dollar being worth less. Now the government wants to print even more money. It's like Canadians are going to be paying for these tariffs over and over again, because it's like we're going to be paying for the retaliatory tariffs. We're going to be paying for the higher cost of goods. We're going to be paying for it, and that our money is going to be costing even less. So there just really seems to be no end for the suffering of the Canadian people and our absolutely valueless dollar right now. But the thing that probably irks me even more than this is Parliament is prorogued. So how is the government getting permission to print this money and to spend this money? It's the same thing that we're seeing right now with the capital gains tax increase. It's that was never debated or passed by Parliament. And yet the CRA just said, well, it was introduced, so we're going to go ahead and enforce it anyways. We've done some similar things in the past. Now, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is actually taking the CRA to court over this, saying you have no right to implement this tax hike that the MPs have not passed, or as I said, even debated. And I certainly hope that they will be fruitful in their efforts. But it's, again, time and time again, as I just said, the Canadian people, we elect officials. They are supposed to rule for us, but that is not how our system works, because it is so broken and it is not working anymore.
Absolutely. And I think just the idea that we can, like, oh, okay, we can withstand this. We'll just start printing more money. That's the kind of thinking that got us into this problem. Okay, so Chrystia Freeland, who's running for Liberal leader on Monday, she outlined her plan to protect the economy against Trump, which includes dollar for dollar retaliatory goods. So she put out this post here, just basically saying what she would do in terms of, to your point, taxing Canadians on the money that we send out and taxing it through the money that we get in. I don't think a trade war is the solution, but it seems to be the way that these Liberals are going. Likewise, you had Foreign Minister Melanie Joly talking about how diplomacy can work. So this is a clip from her on Monday, telling reporters how she thinks that we should negotiate with the Americans.
When it comes to preventing tariffs, this is our #1 priority, and we're working at it every day. Now, we believe that diplomacy can work, and that's why we're having private conversations, and we won't negotiate in front of the public. We believe that our arguments are strong. I think that I've had numerous conversations where the reaction was actually very positive, but meanwhile, there's still a lot of work. This administration in the US is very unpredictable, so we have to be ready and working on both fronts. Like I was saying, preventing tariffs and at the same time working on our resistance.
Rachel, do you have faith in these people? Do you have faith that they are going to be able to negotiate and stop Trump?
Well, absolutely not. But I just want to point out a couple things. First and foremost, if you listen to Melanie Joly frequently, she basically always has the same talking point when she's being interviewed, which is, I'm not going to tell you the plan right now. I'm not going to negotiate in front of the public, because they don't have a plan. She's got no ideas. You can hear it in her delivery that she's not confident in what she's saying. She doesn't even believe herself. So I don't know why she expects you or I are going to believe her. We can see that she's feeling unsure and insecure in her ability to perform this job. She's certainly not adept at it. And the other thing that I would say is, when she talks about diplomacy, you guys are not being diplomats in the way that you should be. You're talking about the need for diplomacy. Then why aren't you doing that? Why did you choose to hold a caucus retreat to the expense of Canadian taxpayers, rather than going down to DC during the inauguration and doing everything you can to get meetings with the top officials and make the case for Canada? They have done nothing. I recently had a former special advisor to Jason Kenney on the Rachel Parker Show, David Knightlag, and he said, I'm in DC. He was in DC for the inauguration. He was talking to a number of people that he knows that are in the Trump administration, and they noticed that no one from the reigning Liberal Party was in DC trying to get meetings. And they also noticed that Danielle Smith from Alberta was there doing everything she could to make the case for Alberta. And in some sense, she did even receive some from grace from Donald Trump from that. They noticed that Danielle Smith was there, but Ottawa's absence was never more clear. And they are not delivering for Canadians because they simply cannot get past their dislike of Trump. And to the point that they've even conceded at doing their jobs at this point. They're not willing to go and meet with him. They're not willing to make the case for Canada. They are simply standing back and saying, we've tried everything, when in reality, they've tried nothing.
It was such a great interview that you did there with David, and he made so many good points. I think there's no doubt why 77% of Canadians want an election. If you want an election, if you're watching this right now or listening to this right now, head on over to my website, CandiceMalcolm.com, sign my petition. I'm trying to get as many signatures as possible so that I can personally deliver this petition to the Governor General to demand an election. Canadians deserve an election. We deserve a government that has a mandate to be down there negotiating with Trump on our behalf, not this ragtag group, especially not Justin Trudeau. It's I think that the point that they weren't down there, they weren't working the room. Danielle went to Mar-a-Lago, Danielle Smith went to the inauguration, and it's not just about glad handing with Trump. I know, like, so many Liberals and people on the left were accusing Danielle Smith of being an appeaser, of appeasement to Trump, or being a traitor, or undermining the attempts. It's like, well, at least she was there. She was making an attempt to befriend these people. And that is what diplomacy is all about. I think Danielle took, she was the one that took the risk and took a step out there. And people are coming around. At first, I think a lot of Canadians were surprised to see that. And now more and more, she's not a lone wolf on the provincial response. So True North is reporting that we've seen provincial shifts when it comes to tariffs. Smith no longer lone wolf on provincial response to tariffs as Quebec and Saskatchewan shift. So Smith's sentiment was recently echoed by Quebec Premier François Legault, who said any retaliatory action involving energy exports south of the border should first require the approval of provinces and those affected. Regarding energy, I think it's important that it affects a province, that this province has to give its consent first. Likewise, the leader of the Bloc Québécois said absolutely no to an embargo on Canadian oil, of course, because the oil that Quebec gets from Alberta actually goes through the United States. So any embargo would just shut off all of central Canada, from Sarnia all the way up to Montreal. So anyone suggesting that, I'm sorry, but they're an idiot and you shouldn't listen to them. Likewise, Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe has come out supporting something more similar to Danielle Smith. He's expressed his desire for a similar approach on the issue. He said, Saskatchewan is most certainly not supportive of export tariffs and will be working actively to ensure an export tariff couldn't be applied on Saskatchewan products. So Danielle Smith taking the lead, and others are following. What's your make of this, Rachel?
I think that Danielle really went out on a limb with her approach to the trade war and Donald Trump's threat of tariffs. And she was pretty roundly criticized for that. We saw the establishment media really going after her. She was accused of being a traitor, really horrible things. And I think that it's paying off for her, not only on the home front, but also nationally. So let's start by talking about Alberta first. Certainly her approach to advocate for Alberta and put Alberta's interests first is what the Albertan people want. We elected a premier to stand up for our interests, not to stand up for Ottawa, especially at a time when there was so much friction between the province of Alberta and the federal government, who has seemed really not to be vested in or care about our economy and to continuously attack Alberta's energy. And the point that Danielle Smith made was we tried to expand our exports to go west or to go east, and the rest of Canada said no. And so we are entirely reliant on our exports to the United States for our economy and for the Alberta government to generate revenue. And if you shut that off, it will devastate. It will devastate the Alberta economy. And so we have no choice but to continue having a positive trade relationship with the United States. And I think she recognized that the relationship between Justin Trudeau and between Donald Trump had completely broken down. And so she took matters into her own hands and she went over to the States and she began advocating for Alberta. And initially we saw that the rest of Canada was attacking her for this. And now we've seen sentiment shift, not only in public opinion, but also in the fact that other premiers are also following suit, because I think they're recognizing that not only would a ban or retaliatory tariffs impact them, as you said, Alberta's energy also lights up Ontario and Quebec. So it's not simply a matter of just turning off the pipes because it will impact the rest of Canada, but also that her approach with Donald Trump is working and that the Americans do want collaboration with Canada, but they're also tired of a Canadian government that really hasn't done its part, for example, with meeting its NATO commitments, with protecting its border. And yeah, I know people always say, well, the immigration crisis is way worse at the Mexican-US border than the Canada-US border. Okay, but we also have like really serious terrorists here. We had one of India's most wanted terrorists in Canada. The United States is paying attention to this. They recognize that our security is abysmal and they realize how easy it is for these people to cross from Canada into the United States. And so what America is really asking is they're saying, Canada, you haven't done your part for 9 years. It's time to do your part again. And then we can maybe look at, not implementing these tariffs. But right now, Canada is in a very, very weak position. And I think for the people who are criticizing Donald Trump for the economic impact that we're about to feel from the tariffs are severely misguided. It is right that he would do the best by his country and that he would protect his national interests. I just wish that we had a prime minister who also cared about protecting our national interests.
And there's no way that Canada's vetting when it comes to national security. We just don't vet the way that the Americans do. We used to, and we should, but we certainly don't, which is why we end up with terrorists. And to your point, I mean, we reported this in True North, that the number of people on terror watch lists sneaking into the United States from Canada is 5 times more than Mexico. So yes, Mexico has far more people coming through the border, but when it comes to the actual terrorists, there's actually significantly more from Canada. Let's go back to Danielle Smith, though. She was on with Vasi Kapelos on Sunday evening, talking about how she wants to avoid a trade war. So, this is her kind of marquee position, that we don't want to do a tit for tat. It's not a good idea to have a trade war with a trading partner who's so much bigger than you, so much more powerful than you, and can more easily, have tariffs without such a big notice. So let's play this clip of Danielle on CTV Question Period.
I always think that you should try to avoid a fight, especially when you've got a bigger adversary that you're fighting against. The American economy is 10 times the size of Canada, and if we get into some kind of tit for tat retaliatory tariffs, neither country is going to benefit from that, and Canadian consumers are going to be harmed. That's why my approach has been, what can we do to avoid the fight? That being said, I think we all know, based on previous experience, that having a proportionate response is what is normally expected when these kinds of things occur. And so I know that the federal government is working on what that proportionate response would look like. I hope we don't have to roll it out at all. I hope we can avoid tariffs altogether.
And I'll just play one more clip. This is the same interview a little later on. She talks about how Albertans are just not going to accept an export tax on their products.
I've asked the federal government on I don't even know how many occasions over the last number of years about those extra markets and building capacity to them. But even putting that aside for a moment, we're in the moment we're in. I've also asked ministers in the past week if they would do the same thing that people are threatening over oil with auto exports, which would have a equally proportionate impact on Ontario. And they said yes. Like they're not making it a national unity crisis, aren't you?
I don't think that will happen, first of all. And second of all,
but they're not taking it off the table. That's the point, right? Maybe logistically, like you say, both are not really great options, but they're not saying, no, I would never do that.
Well, I think the problem that we saw is that we were getting together as a group of premiers and the prime minister saying, let's not negotiate this in public. And I did my part saying, let's focus on the things that we know the Americans care about, national security and border security. And everybody else went off freelancing. And the thing they kept returning to was punishing Alberta and punishing energy. So I just wanted to make sure that we get back to talking about the things that unite us rather than divide us. And so Albertans are just simply not going to accept an export tax on this product. They're not going to accept the federal government blocking the export of this vital product. And I don't think that demonstrates to the Americans that we are a reliable trading partner, which is what we are trying to do.
Danielle Smith is just 100% right there. She is making the points, and she's the one that's standing up, not just for Albertans. Yes, she is standing up for Albertans, and I think they appreciate that. You can let me know what you think. But she's standing up for, I think, what's in the best interest of all Canadians by avoiding a trade war. What do you think?
That's exactly what I've been hearing from people who are on the ground. They're saying that Danielle Smith has been accused of being a Canadian traitor. But when she's in Washington, D.C., and when she's at Mar-a-Lago, she is playing for Team Canada. She is fighting for all of Canada when she's trying to secure a deal. And as she has said repeatedly, and she's been the one saying this the loudest from the beginning, let's do our best to avoid these tariffs. And I just can't help but wonder why we haven't heard that same line from other premiers. It's immediately been, okay, well, if you do this to us, and we're going to do that to you. Exactly as she said, it's been a tit for tat instead of understanding the Americans' concerns and saying, we do not want these tariffs. Tell us exactly what we need to do to avoid them. We will get serious about security at the border. We will get serious about vetting newcomers to Canada. And we are willing to meet you where you're at to avoid these tariffs. That has never really been the federal government's approach. They're really just too pig-headed to look at their own mistakes, realize where they went wrong, and certainly to make some of the changes that Donald Trump has requested. They would be acknowledging error in their immigration policy and in their vetting policy. And we know that Justin Trudeau and his Liberal Party, they are not willing to even own an ounce of their mistakes. They are so pig-headed when it comes to making changes that would benefit Canadians because it might mean an acknowledgement of wrongdoing on their part. And I believe that is a big part of the reason why we're seeing them proceed in the manner that they have, because they are not willing to change their policy because it would be acknowledging wrongdoing.
That's so true. And, at this point, if they were to do an about face on the major issues that Trump cares about, like immigration, national security, and drugs, I mean, those are like Justin Trudeau's legacy there, right? So it would basically be an admission that his entire time as prime minister has been an absolute disaster, which of course it has. I want to show you one more clip of our friend Danielle Smith there, who is down on American television talking to News Nation's Laura Ingalls. So this accusation that somehow Smith is selling out Canada, she puts that to rest, saying that best friends should never move in together. So really just taking the idea of a merger right off the table. Let's play that clip.
Do you think that Trump should acquire Greenland and Canada?
I think we want to continue to be best friends with the United States. There's a phrase that best friends shouldn't move in together. We have a very strong long-term relationship with the United States. It's been tariff-free for much of it in the last number of decades. We know that we support the Americans in their aspiration for energy dominance, which is connected to national security. Part of the reason why the Americans have been able to export so much oil internationally to achieve their targets and achieve their the support of their allies is because Canada backfills. We have a heavy oil that goes into U.S. refineries to keep prices low for American consumers, and then that allows the Americans to export their product around the world. You make the same case on all the critical minerals. I mean, we're watching as China is trying to cut off the critical mineral supply chain to the United States for germanium and gallium and antimony. We've got all of that in Canada. We've got uranium, which we think would be a great partner for the United States in providing that security. So I think we've got a partnership that works, and we want to maintain that.
Great response there. But I want to ask you, Rachel, I've been talking about this quite a bit on my podcast. What is the response that you're hearing from folks in Alberta when it comes to this idea of a merger? Because I remember we did an event at True North Nation. Well, we do it every year, but I was there 2 years ago. And there was a group of kind of noisy fellows with these hats on that said Alberta USA, and they were really big on Alberta becoming the 51st state. I think most people in the room didn't agree with them, but they certainly wanted to talk about their ideas to everyone. I think that there's, especially among young Canadians, so your generation, I think like 18 to 30-year-olds had the highest number, like 40%, saying that they would potentially move to the United States if they were offered citizenship. What's your take on the seriousness of that? Whether you think that it's an offer that it would pique the interest of Albertans, and then you can respond to what Danielle just said in that clip.
There's definitely a small but vocal minority of people here in Alberta who like the idea of Canada joining the United States, or at least even Alberta joining the United States. I did a show on this. I sort of said, I don't think that this is a good idea. And what I always go back to is I just don't really want to be under an even bigger federal government. I think that the fact that our countries are so big and we have a federal government who has so much power over what's happening in a place so far away is one of the big problems that we see in Canada. And I don't think that joining the United States would solve that. And even while you might like their very effective Republican president now, there's not always going to be a Republican president in the White House. Imagine being led by Joe Biden. I mean, it's not always going to look as good as it is. And so you need to think about these things in a broader context than in just a moment and a place and time. And so while I would say that there is a small minority of people who support that idea, what I'm actually hearing even more of is the feelings of Western alienation that are growing. There is, and there will always be, a separatist movement in Alberta. And I can feel and hear that separatist movement is really growing traction right now, especially when you hear things like Ottawa saying they're going to shut off the taps or they're going to impose a export levy. Separatism in Alberta has always been around. I remember growing up and learning about, the West wants in, led by Preston Manning. And what I'm hearing right now is the West wants out. And I know that there are separatists who are organizing. And I think that if we continue to see this trend from a federal government, that movement will only pick up steam. Now, if we see a conservative government be elected, the separatist movement will certainly wane, but it will never go away. And so I would say that that's the broader trend of what I'm seeing with these negotiations with America and the trade war that we're seeing is that Alberta, a lot of Albertans are just tired of federalism and they don't trust the federal government to get the job done anymore. I think that Danielle Smith had, a pretty effective way of responding to that question with, her little analogy about not moving in with a best friend. And obviously she would be renounced as a traitor if she said that Canada or Alberta should join the US. So she handled that very well. And as I've said, I don't think it's a good idea. I'm not really interested in being guided by a bigger federal government. And look, a lot of people say, oh, America and Canada, they're so similar. And I mean, sure, if you compare Canada and the United States to a place like Japan or China, then we are quite similar. But having spent a significant amount of time in both countries, I do believe that they are very different and that each of the country has significantly different attitudes. And so I don't think that it would be a seamless cultural blend. And I think that Americans and Canadians would be quite frustrated with each other, actually, and the different cultural attitudes that come with each nation state.
Well, it does depend on the region, right? Like I grew up in Vancouver, and whenever I meet someone from Seattle, like it's like they're like a long lost sibling. Like it's like we have the same kind of ethos and values when it comes to like nature and being outside and being connected to nature. And growing up in the Pacific Northwest, like commiserating over the terrible rainy weather. Like I think that there are certain parts of the country that are quite similar, and then other parts that are like wildly different. Like I think the example would be like Montreal and like Dallas, Texas. Like there's not a lot in common between those two places. So I definitely see your point and probably agree with it. Okay, I want to move on. This is the last topic we're going to cover on the show today before we move on. I'm not sure if you saw this over the weekend. We got a little preview of potentially the next prime minister or future prime minister of this country if things go horribly wrong. This is Justin Trudeau's 17-year-old son, Xavier Trudeau, releasing his own, I guess, a preview for his upcoming R&B album. So he's releasing a song called Till the Night's Done, and he put this out. So let's play this little promo teaser that he put out online. God help us if he becomes prime minister one day, or our children. But I mean, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe he's interested in music and not interested in politics like his dad and his grandpa there. But I kind of feel sorry for him because I just know that the people online do not like Justin Trudeau. The people do not like him, and they will take out their rage and anger on his son. Remember that Justin Trudeau posted this on Instagram back in October of 2024. He said that a dad's number one job is to embarrass his son. And then he talked about how him and his son visited a runway up in the north. I think we have a video of this just showing their embarrassing antics here.
Okay, we're ready. Yeah. All right, we're going to help this plane in. Coming in, and ready in the turn. And coming towards us, yeah, little right, there you go, yeah, there you go. Coming in. Now you better not blow the landing, though. We set him up so nice. We get to do the best things when we're in the north.
Like Justin Trudeau is at the point in his career where everything he does will get trolled, and there'll be nasty comments, and you kind of feel sorry for the son for what is going to come, I'm sure, with this. I know that the Economic Times is already covering this. Economic Times of India reported on the story, and look at the photo that they included there. The very, very embarrassing picture that Justin Trudeau posted, wearing an oversized pink hoodie with his son wearing an undersized, tight pink t-shirt going to the Barbie movie last year. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Rachel, what do you make of this?
I think that my approach to this is unique. I haven't seen a lot of people follow suit. But, compared to Justin Trudeau, I have a tiny public profile. But, I still have a bit of a public profile, and so does my husband. And so in respect to that, I don't post things about my kids online because I know that there's a lot of people who hate us, who hate our political views. And I believe that it is my responsibility to protect my son to the best of my ability. And so for the time being, I do not post pictures of him online. I do not tell stories about him online. I keep my information about my son private because I want to protect him. And, a lot of people are very free with posting pictures of their kids online. And if you don't have a public profile, then maybe you're safe to do so. I'm still not totally sold on that. And so I just like to keep my private life. And, at a certain point, my kids, they will be old enough to make that decision for themselves. And I think that at times we've seen Trudeau almost set his kids up for failure with some of the weird things he's posted about them, like that picture of him and his son in the pink. Like you just knew that was going to receive so much hate. And maybe Justin Trudeau is a hardened political operative who can handle that kind of public pressure. But I don't think that any kid should have to, you're going to be inclined as a kid to go look at that picture, to go look at the comments underneath it and see all the hateful things that people are saying on you. And I can't imagine that that would be very healthy for a young man still developing psyche. And, I guess Justin Trudeau's kid, he's old enough now that he's decided he wants to get into music. And, maybe he's old enough that he can make that decision for himself. I think to your point, maybe this would have been a good time for parents to say, why don't you just wait, till I'm out of politics for a little longer, let things cool down till everyone's not talking about me so much. And then why don't you go ahead and go ahead with your music career? But right now it's just, I'm afraid that the way that people feel about me will really get in the way of your music career. And I just don't think we've seen a lot of good judgment. And, his kid is still a kid. And I obviously am not a fan of Justin Trudeau, but I would never say anything hurtful about someone else's children because they are still a child. And I think that's just over the line. But, to the point about the music, there was a period of my life, I know some people are going to judge me for this, where I did like R&B music. I liked the type of music that we just listened to there. No longer. I'm glad to say that my tastes have matured and developed. But, what we can really see in that brief little bit of a music video that was showed is it's really money that is elevating this. It's not talent. I mean, his singing is barely above a mumble. And obviously there's some good editing work done there. There's, some good audio tuning there to make it sound really cool and interesting. But from what I've seen so far, I doubt that he's going to have much musical prowess, but obviously his family has the ability to pay for this, as is so often with people who seek to be artists nowadays.
Well, I completely agree with your point about not posting pictures of your children online. I'm a big supporter and proponent of the digital modesty movement. This idea that like my kids are not, it's not that they don't belong to me, and like I don't put their pictures up. Like their images are private into our family, and they are for our family only. And it is a very bad idea, I think, for people to post pictures of their kids. Especially we see so many sort of young influencers or young moms that try to become famous based on sometimes posting like super private pictures of their children. Children have no say, of course, in whether or not their images are going to get put online. So we adhere to that digital modesty as well. And it's such a great way to live, because when you're obsessed with Instagram and posting the latest thing that happens, it's like that's all you think about and it takes over. When you just decide to like put the phone away and be present with your children, not trying to like capture pictures of every minute, it just allows you to appreciate them and enjoy them so much more. Like I send pictures to like our family group chat. I send around a picture of the kids in the annual Christmas card. And that's about it, because I don't think that people should post photos of your kids. So we're in complete agreement on that one, Rachel. And I do sort of feel for Xavier. I think that this is probably not going to go very well for him. Last word to you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that you're in agreement on that. I think it's considered, controversial because people love to post photos of their kids, but there's a lot of really scary and gross things that people can do to images of your kids and ways that they can manipulate them. So I would just encourage, any parents out there to spend a little bit more time thinking about it and don't just do something that has always been done, because there's a lot of technology has changed our society very rapidly over a short number of years. And it seems to be only now that people are pausing and saying, we haven't really thought about all the ethical implications of some of the actions that we're taking that seem so normalized. And I would just encourage everyone to do so.
Great. Well, Rachel Parker, thank you so much for joining the show. It's been so fun to have you on. Everyone go check out the Rachel Parker Show. Thanks for joining us, Rachel.
Hope to be back.
Okay. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Candice Malcolm. This is Candice Malcolm Show. Have a great day. We'll be back tomorrow with all the news. God bless.